Welcome to Washington in Focus, powered by the Center Square and a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Jeremy Lott. I'm back, regional editor of the Center Square Newswire for Washington State. To support great podcasts like, for instance, this one, please donate by clicking the link in the show description. Today, I am joined by Brett Davis, Spencer Pauley, and RaeLynn Ricarte, which rhymes with Pivarti. And we're going to start with RaeLynn first for personal reasons. RaeLynn, I'm going to ask you about 3 stories this week. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. First one is titled Hand in the Wallet. Representative Voles would give Washington voters more say on tax hikes. Who is he? What sort of say would they get?
So Representative Voles is from Spokane, and he has proposed a constitutional amendment that will require tax increases to go to the voters, and they'll, weigh in on them. Either the legislature can refer or the people can do an initiative. But if the voters say that they don't want the tax, then it goes back to the legislature, and they have to go through the process to consider it again without being able to add any amendments or make any changes. And then if they vote to keep it, it's in. There's no more referring.
Yeah, we actually had to change the title of this because he said he would give the voters the final say, and we said, well, actually, no. Your proposal gives the legislature the final say, but they have to in basically his point of view is they have to really own it. So right now, if they pass a tax increase, often it will end up on the ballot, but as an advisory vote, which the voters are asked, should this be maintained or repealed? And they typically say repeal it because we don't like taxes. No one does. Then the legislature then proceeds to ignore it. In this case, they have to vote on it again.
Yeah, he's feeling like if they have to go back in after the voters have said no and reconsider and vote on the whole thing, then it shows the voters pretty clearly that they're not listening. And so that's the goal of his constitutional amendment. Okay, cool.
The next story is titled Spokane County Republican Leaders at Odds Over Chair Choice.
Yeah, this was a really strange one. I had to call them because it was like there's 3 Republicans on the commission, and then the legislature restructured the district so that they added 2 Democrats onto the commission in November. And so the 3 Republicans, right out of the gate, the first vote was on who would be the chair, and they kind of got into a fight over that. And one of the Republicans joined with the Democrats in voting against either one of the other 2 Republicans being the chair. And the 2 Democrats that lost that bid kind of called her out for not being a true conservative, and
so the Republicans who lost the bid.
Right, and she voted for herself and the 2 Democrats voted for her, so she got in as chair. And they are questioning her ability to fulfill that role because she's also president of the Washington Association of Counties, and she has a lot of other obligations. So they had a little big fight between the Republicans right out of the
So wait, she's president of WAC? Yeah. Okay, just checking.
Yeah, I know we want to say all kinds of things there, but we're not giving our opinion. Anyway, so that was kind of interesting to see the dynamics of that go on before they've even really got started. So we'll see now if this Republican sides with the Democrats, more often than not, which is what they're concerned about. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens here.
Okay. Yes, developing, as someone would say. The final story for you today is Prison Reform Group seeks to end harmful mail scanning. This is probably not an article people expect to see in the Center Square. I'm very glad we published it. Can you talk to me about it?
Yes, I'm all things prison reform because I work in that field, but and I have several veterans that I communicate with. So, this issue is kind of a big issue because there's nothing else in prison except what you get from home to keep you going, the little cards you get, the letters you get, and to get a photocopy of the drawing your kid made you or a photocopy of your birthday card is just the prison policy initiative says, this is detrimental to the prisoners. And more states are doing this. And a lot of jails are doing this right now. You can't have in-person visits in jails anymore. You have to do it through video visits. And they're doing this scanning because they say contraband is moving, through the mail. And the prison policy initiative says, the contraband is really moving through the guards, moving through the inside. And the few infractions there would be in the mail room do not justify taking away mail for everyone.
Okay. Well, I mean, isn't there sort of a midpoint or it's not, these prisoners aren't getting unopened mail typically, right? It's
they always open the mail. In fact, one of my lifers, they cut the letters like down the seam. They're so busy checking that my mail's in pieces when it gets there, and he gets to put the puzzle back together.
Sure. But I mean, this reform group isn't saying don't check the letters. It's saying just give them the letters once you've checked.
Give them the originals. Like they need to have the originals to be able to look at, and anyway. So, and Washington Department of Corrections was really great about getting right back to me that they do not have this policy in play. They do it on a limited basis if there's something questionable in an envelope, but. So I had a good chance to kind of see where they stood in, because 14 states are doing this now, and the list is growing. That's 14 states within the last 5 years.
All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out in Washington State and nationwide. RaeLynn has to go deal with an issue, so the rest of the podcast is going to be Brett and Spencer and me. I've been out for a couple of weeks. I don't know. Just I was in Hawaii, as they pronounce it. For a lot of that, and it was not paradise. I mean, it was, but it was just like when you're dealing with like sick yelling kids at night and a bad back. It turns out that the way you can ruin paradise is put people there. But
is that why you're not more tan?
Yeah, that's one reason. So I don't know what's been going on in the state while I've been out, guys.
Who are you talking to first? Me?
But neither of you. I mean,
okay.
Brett, you want to go first?
I will go ahead and go first.
Yeah.
Well, as you might imagine, the capital gains income tax is in the news again.
Yeah. I
don't think it's ever stopped being in the news. So recently, Senator Christine Rolfs, she's the top budget writer in that chamber. She was asked on TVW's Inside Olympia if the legislature is going to use the capital gains income tax revenue to, in the state budget.
Yeah.
Of course, that's an issue because the capital gains income tax was declared unconstitutional, ruled unconstitutional by a lower court. It's before the state Supreme Court, and oral arguments will begin on January 26th.
Yeah. But
the law will actually go into effect on January 28th. So it's very confusing. But anyway, she was asked about this, and her basic answer was, I don't know.
Okay. Well, so I mean, that's an honest answer.
Yet. Yes, an honest answer.
So, yeah, I don't. I think that what is their stance basically that there's a small enough amount of money that would be initially collected as part of this, that if the Supreme Court decides to, side with all previous Supreme Courts in this state and say that it's unconstitutional, that, they've got the funds, they're fine, and they can just cover it. It's not a big deal.
She didn't really go into any details. She basically just said she didn't know. The host asked her about this because Governor Inslee's proposed budget from December includes $1.4 billion from the capital gains income tax. So he seems to be counting on it. So that's what prompted that question.
Okay.
Which is not to say all Democrats are necessarily for it. There was a Seattle City Club legislative preview where Senator Manka Dhingra, she basically said, don't count your chickens before they hatch. So she seemed to be against that. So
yeah,
doesn't seem to be across the board. But it'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court eventually rules. I have no idea what they're going to rule.
Yeah, I mean, my money, just because of what they've done so far, is that they are going to rule it constitutional. That's my guess.
I would not be surprised.
But I mean, this is a far more activist court than I've seen. So we'll see how that plays out.
It just seems off-putting to see them, at least in a certain regard, counting on money already before the court's even made a ruling.
Yeah. So, you covered a couple other things this week, a couple bills that are hot button bills. I'll
yes.
read the titles of the articles, and then we'll just talk about them relatedly, I think.
Sure.
Bill would allow local gun control, and bill would greenlight police pursuits. What's happening with these?
We've got guns and police pursuits. Yeah. It must be the law enforcement section of the show.
Yeah, it's the pew 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 section of the show.
So Washington State has a preemption law that prevents local jurisdictions from making gun control laws that are stronger than the state standard. But a bill introduced, House Bill 1178, would change that, would allow local governments to adopt firearm ordinances, including those that were more restrictive than state law. Rep. David Hackney is the sponsor of that bill. He framed it as a restoration of local jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
There were actually a lot of local government officials that showed up to support that. We had a member of the Spokane City Council, a member of the Yelm City Council, and even the Seattle deputy mayor of Seattle showed up and basically made that same pitch that, local government knows what's best. So we should be allowed to do that in terms of firearms. As you might imagine, there were a lot of people who disagreed with that. We had the NRA rep for Washington, the Spokane County Sheriff, among others, came out and said, this is going to create a patchwork of laws that people can't possibly keep track of, let alone adhere to. I mean, they mentioned you could be driving in one area.
Sorry, you talk.
Go ahead. I was just saying, you could be driving in one area and it's perfectly legal to have a firearm on your person. You cross into another jurisdiction and you'll have to have your firearm locked in a storage, in the trunk of your vehicle. And in another instance, it may be banned altogether, which seems very unrealistic if you're traveling any amount of distance. I mean, who could possibly adhere to those rules? Yeah.
The other thing is, it seemed as I understand it, to be sort of a ratchet in the sense that you could pass gun control that's more restrictive than the state, but not less restrictive.
Right.
So it's not really like letting locals set rules. It's letting locals set more onerous rules than
right.
what you already have.
And there was a gal there testifying, and she's a real estate agent, and she was saying, I have to travel a long ways for my job. I often have to, go to places that don't have cell service, so they're remote, have to deal with vagrants and squatters and things like that. And she says, how am I supposed to, keep up with these laws in all these jurisdictions? And, she just sort of framed it hinting at, this would imperil her safety. So
yeah,
that was an interesting angle. So
indeed,
we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Another hot button issue has just been the issue of police pursuits. Why don't you spell this out to people who have never heard of this issue before? What's going on in Washington State with police pursuits?
People in other states are like, what? You're not allowed? Police aren't allowed to pursue criminals? So I believe I'm correct saying this law was passed in 2021. It basically sets a probable cause standard for police to, engage in vehicular pursuits, whereas before it was probable cause. So basically they raised the bar in terms of, when police can pursue. And Reps Alicia Rule and Eric Roberts have introduced legislation, House Bill 1363, which would basically restore the reasonable suspicion standard. So lower the bar for police being able to engage in pursuits.
Okay. And this, this is not the first attempt to do this. What happened in the last session?
They tried last year and it didn't go anywhere.
Well, I mean, it went somewhere, but then it died because it passed in the Senate, it passed in the House, and then you get to the last day of the Senate, and there were how many attempts made to bring this to a vote?
I want to say there were at least 3.
I believe there was 3 attempts to bring this to a vote, and they refused to vote on it, and it died as a result.
Yes. So it was interesting listening to the committee hearing on this because, there were proponents talking about, I guess, if there was a hearing or if it was just me reading up on the issue. Proponents of the law claim, fatalities have gone down, and there's a study included in the story I wrote about how that seems to be the case, that, fatalities are down, but also, people just fleeing from the police or not stopping, and vehicle thefts are way up. So it seems like there needs to be some sort of balance here. But
yeah, the most egregious case there are many egregious cases here, but one of them is that there is a man who was suspected of kidnapping, who was fleeing the police, and he called up in 911 and he said, "Tell them to stop pursuing me. It's not legal."
He's not just a driver, he's also a lawyer.
And they said, "Sir, would you please pull over?" And he said, "No."
So I don't know if this legislation is going to get anywhere. Senator Manka Dhingra has sort of indicated she doesn't really have any interest in letting it be heard, and so she may end up actually killing the bill. Okay. She's the chair of the Law and Justice Committee, so
yeah, it'll just depend on how much pressure there is, I suppose.
Right. So good times.
Good times. All right. There's Spencer. We're going to stick with the legislature for a couple of your stories because when the legislature's in session, there is so much stuff that's just flying around everywhere that you this week did some great pinch hitting, and so I want to talk about a couple of the pieces you did. One is titled "Experts Cast Doubt on Coordinated Wealth Tax Bills." What's happening here?
So basically, state legislators across 8 states announced a collection of bills that target the wealthiest citizens in the U.S. These states include Washington, of course, California, Illinois, Connecticut, Hawaii, New York, Maryland, and Minnesota.
Okay.
So 6 of these 8 states, like the proposed bills, essentially seek to change the rules on capital gains and estate taxes. But with California and Washington, it's more of a direct wealth tax.
Mm-hmm.
So for specifically Washington state, the proposed bill would create a property tax on what is considered extreme wealth derived from the ownership of stocks, bonds, and other financial assets. So you would see the collected revenue be dedicated to education, housing, disability services, and tax credits for Washington's working class families.
Yeah.
But, we looking into it, talking to some people, it seems like some experts just don't see how, some of the wealthiest people just move to a different state. An example is Elon Musk moving from California to Texas, to avoid paying high taxes. And so it's just interesting to see some of this clash here. But I was quoting Summer Stinson. She's the executive director of the Washington-based think tank Economic Opportunity Institute. Yeah. And she sees like wealth tax as a solution to, growing poverty rates in the state. 25% of Washington residents are living in poverty, according to the statistics from her.
According to her, that is that statistic is seems a little baked to me, to be honest.
Yeah. Take it as you will. But revenue collected from a wealth tax would just go towards housing, education, disability aid, and more. Yeah. So
it was she wrote this in The Stranger. We actually yesterday ended up quoting The Stranger twice, which if you had told me when I started this job that there would be a day when we'd quote The Stranger twice, I would have laughed at you. But
that was I did notice that too. It was funny.
That's just how it goes. When when news breaks, we have to fix it somehow. So. Mm-hmm. So the other story is this is a follow-up story. Washington House seats member accused of misrepresenting service record on Veterans Committee. What's happening here, Spencer?
So State Representative Clyde Shavers, he has some questions about his past. We've talked about it before on this podcast, how basically his father came out and wrote a letter saying most of his son's accusations are not true about his own personal life.
Yeah. He said that the way he's talked about his personal life isn't true. And that specifically that he'd misrepresented his military service.
Mm-hmm. So Clyde Shavers said that he was worked on a nuclear submarine, but it might not have been true. I talked to Terry Sparks, who is a U.S. Navy veteran who worked on a submarine, and he was one of the first to raise a flag on Shavers' background, because he said, the timeline doesn't add up. He told me in a phone call saying that, he never went to submarine school, which you have to do. So that kind of started this whole thing that we've talked about. You've seen other people cover it, but now the Washington State Veterans Committee has him on the committee. So, so I reached out to the head of that committee. Her name is Cindy Ryu, and she told me in an email that she is pleased to have Shavers on the committee. I'll say, quote, Representative Clyde Shavers served honorably in the Navy and was duly elected by his constituents to his position as state representative. Veterans and Military Affairs was added to the newly renamed Innovation, Community, and Economic Development and Veterans Committee, and I am pleased to have the 15 members, including Shavers, serving on this committee, which I chair.
Okay. Well.
So she's backing him up, despite some of these claims. And when I talked to Terry about this, he told me that if he has disdain for the military, which his father said in his letter, probably not a good idea to have him on the committee.
Yeah. He's like the local version of Congressman George Santos.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Okay. Well, so we'll see how that committee assignment plays out. The final story that we're going to talk about is kind of a downer, but it's a thing you got to cover. Over 3,000 King County employees laid off between Microsoft and Amazon. What's going on there?
So Microsoft and Amazon combined laid off 28,000 workers. Amazon cut its workforce by over 18,000. Microsoft laid off 10,000. And so combined for the Seattle and just Western Washington area, that's a combined 3,178.
Yeah.
So Amazon, the CEO, Andy Jassy, just sent a message to Amazon employees saying that, the majority of the role eliminations are in Amazon retail stores and their technology solutions organizations. And it kind of caught people off guard, it seems like. And with Microsoft, it says that, is aligning its cost structure with its revenue and where the company sees customer demand. So they cut off about 5% of the company's total employee base.
Yeah.
I think Microsoft said the company was expecting to take a $1.2 billion charge in the second quarter of this year, just related to severance costs, the changes to the company's hardware portfolio and the cost of lease consolidation. So these layoffs will go into effect in March. I want to say the 19th and the 20th, if I remember correctly. I wrote the story yesterday, so still
one bright side is I believe both all of the employees that we're talking about will get pretty decent, by national standards, at least severance packages. So they'll have some running room. We wish you all the best, people, in finding new jobs, and maybe even something at the center square. We'll see. So,
we'll see,
yeah, that's right. That's about all the time we have for this week on Washington in Focus. Thanks for hanging with me, Brett and Spencer, and before that, RaeLynn. Make sure to subscribe to Washington in Focus wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next week with more great podcasts.